Hello, we're Thomas and Angela Carpenter. We're missionaries with Compassion Link of the Assemblies of God. We specialize in disability ministry, and we love what we do.
It was actually the first weekend of March that we had gone down to Arkansas and done some ministry. And that weekend, I started having some symptoms, just a really bad headache and weakness, and I just thought maybe I had caught the flu or had a cold or something. And just a couple days later, coming back from that trip, then Thomas started not feeling well, and he was actually fixing chicken soup for me one night, and he said, "Man, I'm not feeling good either." And that was on a Tuesday night, and by that Friday, he was feeling really bad. We went to the ER, and this was just the weekend before the shutdown. We just caught it at the very beginning, and they sent us home from the ER with several medicines.
I do remember on the following Wednesday, after I was taking this medicine, I had an inhaler. I was abusing that inhaler, actually. The instructions said every 4 hours, take 2 puffs. And I was breathing so hard and not getting enough oxygen. I could tell I wasn't feeling well, so I was taking about every hour, I was taking a couple of puffs on that thing. And just still could not breathe, still couldn't get any oxygen, couldn't get any energy. And I mentioned to Angela, I said, "Hon, if I'm feeling this bad tonight, you just need to take me back to the emergency room." I said that because the symptoms got progressively worse at night, when you're trying to rest. Angela was led of the Lord when she said, "Well, babe, if you're feeling that bad now, let's not wait till tonight. Let's go." And really, had she not been led of the Lord to say, "Let's go now," I probably wouldn't have made it, because once I made it to the emergency room, my symptoms just went critically downhill from there.
So when we pulled up to the ER, the nurse met us at the car with a wheelchair, and he looked at me. I guess he could tell, I was ready to bolt, and he said, "No, ma'am, don't even get out of the car." And I was like, "What?" Oh man, I started crying.
Man, the waterworks turned on for both of us.
Anyway, I had to leave him, I didn't have any other choice. So I just cried all the way home and talked to Jesus, and went and finished out my quarantine time then by myself. But the Lord had spoken to me that morning, reminded me that the word that He had given me for 2020 was the word hope. And so when I came home by myself, it was just like, okay, Lord, you would not specifically remind me this morning about hope if you were going to take Thomas. So on the way home, I just had that talk with the Lord, just crying, and I got home, and I spent just the next 9 days, I was by myself. And I remember on 2 different occasions, people that I did not even know bringing me groceries to my door in the rain. A friend of a friend calls and says, "Hey, there's this girl, Angela, and she's by herself, and her husband's, in the hospital in critical care." And I just saw over and over how the Lord was taking care of me. And so many people put things at my door and sent me books to read through the internet and all this different kind of stuff. And so, when you go through an experience that is something maybe you've never experienced before, I've had people ask me just, how did you handle that? What did you do? And what comes to my mind over and over is that I had to dig down a little bit deeper in my faith and say, "Okay, Lord, what are you doing here?" And the Lord reminded me that, sometimes our faith, we have faith, but it's a struggling faith. And the Lord doesn't feel bad at us when we struggle in our faith. We have to go through the process. And He just doesn't want us to stay there. So we just keep trusting Him and looking to Him for help. and then our faith gets stronger, and it just seemed like every day that the Lord would just remind me of His faithfulness and give me another reminder of what He had brought me through before and how He was going to be faithful in this situation.
And I remember them coming in and gave me breathing treatments, and they put me on oxygen, and they were trying every way they could to keep my oxygen level up, and they couldn't. I didn't really understand everything that was going on there, but I knew that they were getting concerned. I saw they were being very fervent in what they were doing and really animated in a lot of stuff they were doing. And so I'm laying there in the bed, and all of a sudden I hear through the curtain, I hear one of the nurses or doctors, I guess it was a doctor, that said, I think we need to take him to CCU. I think it's important that we get him up there as quickly as we can, get him on a ventilator, because we can't get his oxygen level up any other way. We've tried everything we could do, and we can't. And so at that point is when I called Angela and I said, hey, hon, I think that they're going to take me to CCU. I'm hearing talk. And so I want you to pray. I want you to call Dad. I want you to call Ched. I want you to call Dana, my sister. I want you to call Wade Bum, who's my pastor friend that lives down in Florida. I said, get them to pray. And so she called those four, and they just got the hotline going. And the next thing I know is they come in. This little male nurse stepped around and gave me a shot in the thigh, as I remember. And then the doctor put that cuff over my face. And at first I didn't think it was working. Then the next thing I know, I'm waking up 30 days later. And when I woke up, I didn't realize I'd been, anything that had happened. I thought it would just been just 2 or 3 days maybe. And yet that's when they said, no, you've been in CCU about 30 days. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't realize how sick I was. When my physical body was at its worst, my spiritual body was thriving. My spiritual inner man, I have never felt the presence of God so close in my life. I have never just been in a place that no matter what I was feeling or sensing or seeing in visions around me, even things that would usually cause fear or cause panic or sadness, none of that was present. It was just perfect peace. I've heard all my life the phrase, a peace that passes understanding, and I understand that now. I understand what kind of peace that is. I don't know how I got it, but it's just such an amazing thing to know that it doesn't matter. Little things don't matter anymore like they used to, because God's got this. God, His presence, when His presence is around you and He holds you up, it's an amazing thing. But in my coma, I remember just a feeling of peace. I was aware of a lot of things going on. I could hear the doctors and the nurses talking. I could hear voices. I could sense when they were around me. I could feel their presence. And I remember that on an occasion, as they're putting the bed on me, in my comatose state, I remember looking over in my left arm, and right in the crook of my arm, I saw my son who had passed away in 2011. I saw him laying there beside me, with the head on my shoulder. He just looking up at me and smiling. And I remember he was wearing a gray hoodie, and he took it off and he kind of wadded it up like a pillow and put it right there. He laid his head upon my shoulder. And I looked, and Angela was sitting at the edge of my bed. And she was just sitting there, similar to where she is, like she is now, with her leg crossed, and she's smiling at me and kind of watching over me. And I'm trying to get her attention to say, hey, look and see do you see who this is? This is Buck, sitting right beside me, laying right beside me. And we got up out of the bed. It seemed like I physically did, but I know it was a spiritual moment. And Buck and I were playing catch with a baseball. And I remember, we were really zinging them, like we had never thrown the ball before. And it was so cool to be able to catch something that fast, and the sound that it made when the ball hit your glove. I won't ever forget that. It was like You hear it when the big league players are playing ball. You hear the pop of the ball and the leather of the glove. Man, we made that sound muffled. I mean, it was loud. And we just had a good time there throwing the ball back and forth to each other. And it was during that time that we came back together after throwing the ball. And we kind of leaned in each other and gave each other a hug. And I made the statement to Buck. I said, man, it's just not fair. We can't do this all the time. This is awesome. And he got real serious. He said, well, Dad, life isn't fair. And I'm like, yeah, I know, life isn't fair. But he said, life can't be fair because sin. He said, well, as long as sin is in the world, life can never be fair.
I had just a special time in prayer, and all I could see was just Buck throwing the ball, and every time he would catch it, he would turn and flash me the biggest smile. I mean, just like, I am enjoying what I'm doing. Aren't you proud of me catching this? And maybe now I think that smile was, haha, I'm up here with Dad, but you don't know it kind of smile. Looking back on that, of course I journaled all about it. I never once considered, who is he throwing the ball to? It never entered my mind to wonder that. And then when Thomas told me about his experience, I was like, oh, now I know. Now I know who he was playing catch with. And I was thankful that the Lord didn't reveal that to me, because maybe I would have thought that Thomas had passed away,
I remember laying there in bed one day, and I was fully conscious of things around me, even though my eyes were not open. I was laying there and I could hear the voices of the nurses and the doctors. And I began to hear a multitude of voices. I began to hear more and more people, and voices I recognized. And then it was voices from other languages, places I've been, places we've traveled to. And again, it was revealed to me of okay, that's such and such a language, or that's that language. And people are praying all over the world for me. I didn't know that. The only way I knew that people were praying for me, and the extent of that, was because I heard them praying. I heard their prayers going before the throne of God. And again, it was the revelation of the Spirit that told me, these are prayers for you. These people are praying that you're going to get better. And it's like one by one, I would hear one voice stand out stronger than the other, like a microphone dropped down in front of them. And I could hear different people praying. And it was just such an amazing thing to hear. And one of those voices was Angela. And I remember her praying this one phrase. And her phrase was, Lord, would you please heal my wonderful husband, Thomas? I need him. And it was at that moment, I was like, hey, she needs me. Something's going on. I'm stressing her out here. I need to get to feeling better. And so it was that moment that I consciously said, okay, I'm going to get better. I need to go back. And so it seemed just like not very long at all that I came out of my coma. And when I came out of my coma, I looked over and Buck wasn't there anymore.
I was thrilled that the Lord gave Thomas that time with Buck in heaven. Then when he told me that he heard my voice praying, and he said that he heard me say, Lord, would you please heal my wonderful husband Thomas? I need him. I was like, I said those words in prayer. And he said, I know you did. I heard you say them. So, God's not bound by the things that we're bound by, miles or by, spirit or experiences and all of that. Like Thomas just had that revelation, had that understanding that some of the prayers were just spoken in somebody's spirit. They didn't pray them out loud, or they just wrote them down in their journal, but some were spoke out loud. But no matter what kind of prayer, that God heard them all. And we have a lot of friends with disabilities who are nonverbal. They can't speak, but they were praying for Thomas. And I said, Lord, you heard their prayer. In their heart, you heard their prayer.
It seemed like every day was a new miracle, but the miracles were small to everybody else, perhaps, but huge to me. I remember when I first tried to make contact with Angela, it was the middle of the night or late at night, and I'm trying to text on my phone, and my hands are so shaky and so weak, it's hard for me to even hold up my cell phone. To try to type a text message, I tried to type something and I couldn't. I typed something out to Angela, I did a little video to her, and such an amazing God we serve that He took me from being a very strong man to a very weak man, a very dependent man, which was humbling, and I needed that experience. I needed to be taught that I can't live on my own strength. I have to have His strength to do it. I've always prided myself in being bigger, faster, stronger than most other people, and then I find myself not even able to do my own toiletries, not being able to lift my hand up to my chin. And I remember I texted Angela one time, still it took me a long time to even text this, and I texted her, I said, or maybe I videoed, I said, I have touched my chin with my thumb, with my right thumb 5 times without lowering my head, because it would be I would shake so bad and I couldn't lift it maybe more above like this. And the one day when I actually did, I was like, oh, I did it once. Mm-hmm. Let's see if I can do it again. And I did it 5 times. And I'm like, that's such a great thing. Most people wouldn't understand how huge that was, but it seemed like the Lord was allowing me a new gift every day. And I will recall that the whole time that I was in the high observation unit, it was a special part of Select Hospital where I had basically personal nurses. I had 2 personal nurses, day shift and night shift, 2 each. And I remember that I'm in there, and I still haven't had anything but maybe a dropper full of Sprite they gave me when I first arrived, and then it was swabs in my mouth, or a spoonful of ice chips once an hour or so. And they had to do that because any kind of moisture in the respirator would clog it up. So they couldn't just give me all the ice or water or liquid that I could drink. So they had to be very careful on that. And I remember I'm praying, I'm like, Lord, if you could just give me something to drink. I'm so dehydrated. And the Lord said, I want you to hydrate in me. Concentrate on hydrating in me. Don't worry about your physical and hydrating your physical. Hydrate in me. I said, yes, Lord, that's what I need to do. I need to just be hydrated by your Spirit. That's the anointing. And I remember praying, He said, what would you want? Do you want some water? I said, yes, Lord, I would love to have something to drink. And He's like, well, what about breath? Would you like to breathe a little easier? Yeah, Lord, you know I'd really love to breathe easier too. This respirator is a nuisance, and it really is hard to breathe through this thing. It's an effort. It's constant effort. And He said, well, would you like to be able to talk to your wife? Would you like to talk to people coming to visit you at your window all the time? Would you love just to talk to them? Lord, those are my top 3 things I'd just love to do if somehow that could happen. And I mean, almost as I'm praying this, it was no less than 30 minutes when my nurse came in, and she said, I just got a call from the doctor, and what she wants to do is she wants to do an experiment. Well, I'm used to experiments because that was the first one that they had been treating. And the nurse said, the doctor would like to see how well you would breathe if we took the respirator off for a little and just kind of see how you do. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And I don't guess I realized as she was saying it that that was going to help me breathe easier, or that I could be able to talk with that thing off. So as she is taking this thing off, she says, now when I take this respirator off of you, you're going to be able to speak. I'm going to put this cap on your trach so that you can talk. I said, okay. And she said, but don't overdo it. You know, we don't want you to hurt anything, your vocal cords or anything. So just talk in a normal voice. And so, sure enough, when she took that respirator off and put the cap on there, immediately my breathing was just like the best first breath I'd ever taken. It was like, whew, man, my lungs just filled up with all the air I could take in, and it just felt so good to, and it was right then that I realized, you know what? There's no way I should be able to breathe this good and have double pneumonia. And I think it was right then when I realized, man, I don't think I have pneumonia anymore, because this feels so good for me to breathe. And then she said, okay, now say something. And I said, what do you want me to say? And it was just that strong. And she said, wow, you've got a good, strong, deep voice. You sing in the choir? I said, well, I have. And it was such an amazing thing just to be able to tell this nurse what I was needing, you know, and where I hurt actually, and all these symptoms I was having. And then as I'm talking to the nurse, it was just maybe half a minute. Around from behind, here comes my other nurse, Chuck. In one hand he had a popsicle, and the other hand he had a glass of water. He said, with the respirator off, you can have as much of this as you want. Just a few minutes before, the Lord and I had been talking about these things. I drank 6 glasses of water and ate 4 popsicles. And they took the respirator off. They were supposed to just have it off for 4 hours. And they said I did so well that they left it off for 6. It was on that same day that I called Angela and I said, hey, they took the respirator off. Can you hear me talk? And it took Angela just a second before she realized that I was actually talking to her. And she's like, what? You're and it was just made me feel so good that she had a new joy in her voice, and it was like, hey. And a few minutes later, it seemed like the whole world showed up to my window. And here we're supposed to be, socially distancing and this COVID procedure you're supposed to do. Everyone in my office, and even more, some that don't even work in the office, they came by and did a parade by my window, and it was just like a big party. They were out there partying, but I couldn't join them. I had to be on the other side of the window. And it was such a good feeling to feel so much love coming from the office folks, and they held up signs. Every one of them had their own personal sign that I would read. Right on that window right there had the best poster of all that said something about the Cowboys can't catch COVID. They can't catch anything. I have to tell you, I was, after that little parade, I was worn out. I was so tired. But it felt so good that people came by and saw me, and it was just, but what an amazing day that was. Well, that night they put the respirator back on me. And I'm laying there in bed, and I realize I'm struggling to breathe again because this respirator is on. And it got harder and harder to breathe. And so I reached over and I hit the nurse call button, and I was just going to tell them, that the respirator was not working right or something. I just needed to breathe or be cleaned out. They would come and they'd run this tube down through the trach and suck out any phlegm or mucus that would be in there, and that would usually help. But they did that, and it didn't help at all. And all of a sudden, I went to take a breath in, and I got nothing. It was nothing. And I sucked in, and I couldn't breathe at all. Totally blocked off. Mm-hmm. And the nurses were right there. If I had not called them, I would have suffocated because the machine broke. There was something that got clogged in there. And so they had to take me off the respirator again in the middle of the night, and they had to use an ambu bag for a few minutes while they repaired the respirator. They finally got the respirator fixed, put it back on me, and it worked like it was supposed to the rest of the night. They watched me extremely close that night. But I could have just suffocated had it not been perfect timing. I think it was the Lord that caused all that to happen the way it did. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe it was the hand of God in everything that went on. And so that was another lesson learned. The Lord spared my life on so many occasions when I should have died.
That's right.
That was one occasion. There's another 3 occasions when I was at Cox Hospital where I had a a lead that went into the top chamber of my heart where they put in medicine. And on 3 different occasions while I was in the hospital, my heart went into AFib, and they had to give me medicine into the heart so it would beat regularly again because it was shutting down. So on 3 occasions, they actually saved my life by the quick actions of the doctors there at Cox Hospital. I think another thing that's important to say is that what I went through, I wouldn't change it if I could. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I wouldn't change what happened. The Lord immediately has opened some doors for opportunity for some ministry. Even while I was still in the hospital, it was fun to try to do reverse care on the nursing staff, because I would ask them, hey, how can I pray with you today? Or, tell me a little bit about what you're going through. And it was neat to get so close to the doctors and nursing staff, because they wanted to hear what was going on with me, but I wanted to minister to them, and it created some very unique ministry opportunities for me to be able to give back to the nursing staff, and that was kind of a neat deal.
I knew that the Lord was helping me with Thomas being in the hospital, and He sent us our 2 daughters. One from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Her and her husband came to stay with me when I came out of quarantine, and then our oldest daughter and husband and 2 grandsons came over from another country where they lived, and God sent them home, and they gave me such strength. I lived for every day when I could. I called the hospital several times a day. They actually would answer the CCU unit. Hello, Angela. How are you doing today? And they knew my number, and there were so many nurses that I got to pray with. I was so grateful for them for what they were doing. They loved Thomas, even though he didn't get to know them so well. There at Cox, they knew him as being that first COVID patient. But then when Thomas was moved to Select, and we could go visit him through the window, it was like we were getting reacquainted again, and he was beginning to learn to talk, and every step of his recovery was just another victory. How we just saw God's hand in each thing, hearing His voice again, and just the day that he could stand. He was thrilled that he could stand. He was thrilled that he could take a couple of steps.
One of the activity directors there at Select, the charge nurse, her name was Jessica. And Jessica comes to me and she says, Mr. Carpenter, I have got a surprise for you. I've arranged it for me to take you outside, and we're going to do some outside activities, and your family is going to be able to come and see you. Well, I've been seeing these folks through the window. I never held my youngest grandson, Leland, and it was just really, and I was so excited about that. But that was such a great reunion. And then when I was able to get out of the hospital, I was a little frustrated because I thought I was going to get out on Monday. They said, we've released you to go out on Wednesday. And I'm like, well, you made the approval. Get me out on Tuesday. And I told myself, when Angela comes to pick me up, I'm not going to go out on my walker. I'm not going to go out in a wheelchair. I'm not even going to go out on a cane. I'm going to walk on my own strength. Because the Lord has really brought this healing thing around pretty quick. And sure enough, when I came walking out, it was just, I think I surprised them all when I walked out. They said, oh, there he is. It really felt like going into heaven. It was just such an amazing thing just to get out there and see the family. He was
the first patient to go through all of this, and the first post-COVID and all of that. So there was a big learning curve with Thomas, taking care of him. And so we celebrated just immediate family, and we actually kind of kept it hush-hush for a couple of days. We didn't post that he was home. He just wanted it to be quiet, and he came home on Wednesday. exactly 2 months. It had been 8 weeks, 8 weeks to the day, and then 2 days later on Friday, we posted that he had come home.
So I'm sitting in the recliner, and I look over at Angela, and a lot of times when we're at home, she's in the other room and I'm in the living room area, and she's off busy doing stuff. But I noticed the first couple of days she wasn't quite as busy. She would just be sitting in the same room with me and just staring at me, and it was like, geez, I don't really know what to do. And so it really was kind of getting reacclimated to the home situation, and
God's been good.
Nothing like getting home. That was really kind of a neat deal. Just incredible family and strength. My daughters, my son-in-laws, I will say. And we prayed for our son-in-laws. And what my son-in-laws did for Angela while I wasn't around and I could never repay them for that. They're the two best young men I know. And I actually like them better than my daughters. Just kidding. But they are my sons, and I appreciate what they've done. And family just means a whole lot more.
We just so recognize that this season in our life that the Lord has allowed us to go through has just opened up our hearts and our understanding to what our friends with disabilities actually go through on a day-to-day basis. And everything that Thomas has faced in the last 6 months, he can now look at people with disabilities and say, I've been there on a certain level. I understand what it's like to be total care, to have someone take care of my every need, to learn how to feed himself again. He had to learn how to talk, how to walk. And me as the wife, as the caregiver, I can relate to caregivers much better now. Just helping my husband with his daily care when he came home, in and out of the chair and dressing and just every facet of life. I certainly pray differently for people who are taking care of their loved ones now. So God's impacted our life in a lot of ways, like we didn't expect. But we see now, you know what, God doesn't waste any experience in your life. He's ready to redeem every part of it, to bring something good from it. And so we're grateful for that. And so we're excited about the future and how we can minister on a level like we never have. It's different now. After 20 years, we have a new perspective that touches our heart, for sure.
The real testimony is the people that prayed for me, the people that Angela and others who just kept my name before the throne of God all the time. And that's what's humbling to me, is when I look at the Facebook post and I see where there were 438 shares on one post, or even more than that. I think one post had 700 shares. How many people were praying for me is just amazing. And so when I say my testimony, it's really everybody else's testimony, because it's the power of prayer. It's the power of God to bring me through something that a lot of people aren't making it through. When you pray, I want you to know that your prayers are effective. They're not hitting the ceiling and bouncing back. It feels that way, but it's not. God hears those prayers, and He is moved by your prayers. Your prayers are so important to Him. My testimony is that I got well. Your testimony is that you have powerful prayers. Your prayers are effective, and we want you to keep praying. The Word tells us in Ephesians, says to pray all kinds of prayers. Pray in tongues, pray in English, talk to God. Your prayers are important. And pray on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests.
Right.
Ephesians 6:18. And you just have to know that you are not limited by what you can pray for. God hears them all.